Welcome everyone, Feel, Grow, Live, Evelina here. Welcome to the episode 2 on self-transformation and mindset shift. I'm going to walk you through all the elements and phases of the process of self-transformation. This is guidance, mentorship, and therapy all in one for free. So there you go. In the first episode, we talked about commitment. And as soon as you get that out of the way and you shift your minds towards, yes, I am committed, then we can talk about the second ingredient, which is time investment. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to invest any money. I'm going to ask you to think about and bring your attention to the second element for any change to happen when it comes to mental health and your mind and how you operate, which is you need to decide how much time we're going to invest into that. So bearing in mind that, it's not going to be about how many hours you're going to watch something or, how thick of a book you're going to read. It's really going to be about focusing your attention. That's why we say paying attention. So when it comes to investment, and paying for an investment, it's an investment of attention. Because the more focused you're going to be on this, on yourself, on your mental health, and on your mind, the better results you're going to get. So the time investment and attention investment is going to directly translate into results. And there are a few ways to go about this, which I'm going to be talking about. But we've got commitment and now we've got time investment and attention investment. In here, what you have is, when we talk about investment, what we have here is the fact that the more we invest, the more we get. There's no risk here, right? One thing is for sure, the more focused attention you're going to invest in this, the stronger, more stable you're going to get. And the more clarity you're going to have. And you'll be less overwhelmed. And you're going to be less anxious and less depressed. And you're going to know what you need to be doing then. So this is, the first part was the commitment part was about the why. The second part, the second element is the when and the how we're going to discuss in the third episode. But investment, think about it. If you don't invest your time, you can have all the commitment in the world. Yes, I want to do it. But without deciding when you're going to act out your commitment, because decision without action is nothing, right? It's another self-betrayal. So if you're committing to inner work, if you're committing to ending self-neglect, and you're committing to your mental health and understanding yourself, then you need to decide when you're going to do this. So a few things here, right? And actually that's the effort here. So that's attention. It's not like the gym that you really need to exercise the muscles. In here, it's all about attention and you in charge of that. Nothing is going to make you pay attention if you don't make a decision that you will, right? And this is the case of, you can think of many situations where you were present with your body, right? But you weren't really present with your attention and with your mind. School is a very good example. I mean, how many lessons we sat through without really knowing what's going on, right? So we really need to learn to show up for ourselves. And that's the second ingredient, investment of your attention, which is going to directly translate into you being stronger, more resilient, more stable, having more clarity, which we're talking about here. Because anxiety, depression, they manifest themselves as a lot of different things, which I will go into detail, but the experience is very overwhelming and hijacking, right? Whether anxiety or both. the survival states are really hijacking and full on bodily experience. And then you pay attention actually, right? So making a decision that you are important and that's commitment, and that you're going to invest your attention into learning about your inner world, your mental health, right? So you need to decide when, and it needs to become part of your routine. And here the results really are directly related with the intensity you're going to do it with. So the more time you're going to invest, the better results you're going to have. So it's up to you. You probably might not even have an idea how to do it. So here are the options, right? You can decide that you're going to work on this 20 minutes a day, right? The how, leave it for later. This is the third element, but 20 minutes a day. Actually, 5 minutes, it doesn't work. If you want to build some kind of routine, you can start with 5 minutes, but it's sort of, it drowns into the whole day. It gets lost. You need to decide something that is substantial enough for you to remember stuff, to really commit to yourself. So how much time do you want to devote to showing up for yourself, right? You need to have some kind of time strategy here. You can also do it in a way that, okay, I'm going to work on this or whatever. We're going to choose a topic for you later. For example, I have a Saturday off and I'm going to devote 4 hours for diving into myself and for understanding myself. Okay? So this is the mindset. You need to decide when you're going to do it. There's no other way. You need to really interwoven this into your routine, into your daily routine, because things that we do consistently, we get better at. We are really good at stuff we repeat daily, right? So think about it. Okay, when is the time when it's like where I could, obviously there will be some sacrifices. I mean, sacrifices. You're not sacrificing anything. You're really choosing yourself, which you need to do in order for this to change, your mental health to change. So you really need to devote some time to this. 3 times a week, 2 times a week, you need to decide. Bearing in mind that you're going to create a momentum very quickly. It's slightly uncomfortable, especially for the people who have been neglected, especially for the people who've been through a lot of trauma, abuse, betrayal, and for majority of us, that's the reality. So it's actually a very abstract idea for you to work on yourself and with yourself, because these things are models. So whatever you looked at in your parents, in your family of origin, in your childhood, that's your way of looking at yourself. If you grew up in the environment where all the adults were caught up in their own shit and, it was just chaos and no one was really committed to anything, or they were committed really extremely to their jobs or their careers or whatever, making money, then you don't really know the space of really sitting with yourself and observing yourself and thinking about yourself, because you're disconnected from yourself. This is how you survived, right? So that bearing in mind that this thing can be the space where you're working with yourself and looking at yourself can be quite uncomfortable at first, but this is because it's unfamiliar and we don't like doing things that are unfamiliar, right? We are machines that work in a pattern-like way. So whatever are your patterns, then that's your life, right? In your body, mind, spirit, soul, psyche, everywhere, on every level. So when it comes to inner work, this is about accepting that you're doing something completely new. So this is what happens in therapy. This is the space, the phase at the very beginning where it's really uncomfortable to sit in front of another human being and talk about yourself. I mean, for a lot of people, it's terrifying. Some people do it, obviously, they overshare, but a lot of people undershare for a reason, because this is how they survived. If you lived in a world where you were invisible, your inner world was invisible, this is how you live. And this is the result of it, is the poor mental health you suffer with, right? So anxiety and depression are really states of disconnections from the self. Because again, no one teaches us this at school. We don't learn, I mean, possibly religion, but organized religion has really crossed some lines, so I'm not going to go into this, but it's really about learning to look at yourself in a constructive way. And as I said, it can be a bit uncomfortable, right? So you may want to avoid that, and we do, because another force that works within you is your ego, and your ego may tell you, no, no, don't do that. You know, that's bullshit, you know, keep doing this, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be talking about your ego later, but it's really about you taking charge, being in charge of this space and deciding for yourself from the adult, responsible adult self, rather than your entitled child or your ego or your, or whatever, right? Or your anxious self. You know, your anxious self is not going to want to sit down with itself. So you will want to avoid this. So I encourage you to look at that as a way of actually being for yourself who you needed when you were growing up, because you needed someone who would be with you and spend some time with you. And this is what I'm talking about when I say investment of attention, because attention is the highest virtue we could give to ourselves. And not doing that is, as a result, we suffer with anxiety and depression, living in the disconnection from the self, from the authentic self. So yes, it's going to be slightly uncomfortable, but we need to accept that. But you're going to get better at this, and you're going to start feeling better. Because at the core of this all, there's authentic you, there's authentic self, who wants to be seen, validated with their emotions, with their psychology, with their pain. And a lot of the time, anxiety and depressions are manifestations of that disconnection from the authentic self, if not 100% of the cases. I don't want to be extreme, but that's truly what I've seen in my therapy room. And again, the system is set up this way. This is how the majority of people function. They get hijacked by the external world, because this is what we taught, shown, and this is what's modeled for a lot of us. So therefore we get disconnected from ourselves. And anxiety and depression are the manifestations of that. So yeah, decide for yourself when you're going to do this. I encourage you for that to be every day, a little bit, and then you can increase the time. But how are you going to pay attention? How are you going to practice paying attention to your inner world and your mind, right? And when you're going to do this? Are you going to do this every day, every other day, twice a week, or in 4-hour slot at the weekend? And bearing that in mind and thinking about it, okay? So you've committed. Now you are deciding on when you're going to act out your commitment. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. Your authentic self wants to be heard, seen. Your authentic self, your true self, is waiting for you to commit for yourself. That in itself, if you commit and if you decide, yes, I'm going to actually start understanding myself, or I'm going to spend the time to remind myself who I am, that in itself sometimes dissolves a lot of problems. And that in itself sometimes creates a shift and lift, because when we connect with ourselves and we start seeing ourselves and validate ourselves, yes, you exist, you're okay, blah, 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 then you are safe, and we're learning to be safe, which is for later. That in itself is like, oh, just the mere fact of coming to therapy sometimes create a shift. People will say, oh, I feel a bit better. I like being with myself, and I like talking to you, etc. And that in itself would create a very needed shift that people would crave. So when you're going to do it, decide for yourself. Thank you very much. That was episode 2 of our transformation, and I see you in the episode 3. Thank you.